Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine.
I would like to thank the organizers of this year's convention for inviting me to speak to you today. What a privilege it is for me to address such a distinguished group of educators. As someone who has spent more than a decade on the leadership side of education, I know how important you are to shaping the future leaders of our nation. You've accepted this most vital of missions, this sacred duty, and are forming the hearts and minds of the next generation. You are shaping them into the moral and spiritual leaders Belize will need in the decades to come. You are truly the salt and light of the earth. Can any role be as important as the cultivation of the young authors who one day will write the next chapters of the great story of our jewel nation of Belize? As Pope Francis explains, we transmit to others what we are inside. It is not enough to fill one's head with knowledge. To educate is to transmit life. To be a teacher is to live a mission. And what an awesome mission has been bestowed upon you. To equip our children with the skills they need to flourish. To protect them and propel them to a better life by nurturing their souls and guiding them on the path of virtue. You are entrusted with developing their sense of the Christian national identity of Belize. So thank you for accepting this role. Thank you for your contributions made in both the classroom and in the public square toward the national, spiritual, economic, social development of Belize. And thank you for being here with us today. Because what we are here to discuss, our theme this year, could not be more timely. Our Catholic, our Christian, and our national identity. These identities are inextricably linked through our shared church-state partnership. But I will focus today on what binds us together as Belizeans, our national identity. Our destiny, both individually and collectively, rests upon our identity. And the greatest teacher of all instructed us on this point. 2,000 years ago, Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do men say that I am?" It goes without saying that Jesus was not confused about his identity. Rather, he wanted to ensure those closest to him would reflect upon and understand his identity. "You are the Christ," says Peter, "the Son of the living God." That was a moment of awakening, a spiritual earthquake for his disciples. This beautiful moment captured in the scriptures demonstrates the foundational nature of identity. When we imply this important lesson to Belize, we realize that the journey we are on as a nation, our history, unveils this story of who we are as Belizeans. It is a journey. It is our journey as an independent Belize that has taken place over the past 42 years. And now we open a new chapter in this story. For the second time since independence, Belize is once again engaging in constitutional review through the People's Constitution Commission. This body brings together members from all political parties and a wide cross-section of civil society to exercise broad powers, allowing for education, consultation with the people of Belize, whose input will determine the governance through the ultimate test of a referendum. The body includes churches, which functions as the conscience of our nation. But before we write or edit the next chapter, let us become reacquainted with our national story. So please indulge me as I share my personal experience from 42 years ago when I was a young student. The days leading up to our independence were electric. The excitement was palpable. A people anticipating nationhood, but gripped with the fear of letting go of the familiar. Some feared the economic challenges, and others a possible invasion by our neighbor, who had laid this threat at our feet. But then came the night of September 20th. And at the stroke of midnight, the moment had arrived. Thousands gathered to experience firsthand the birth of our independent nation on September 21st, 1981. I stood mesmerized. Tears of joy flowed down my cheeks when the Union Jack was lowered, only to be replaced by the beauty and majesty of our very own Belizean flag. We had our own national anthem and our own national prayer, so eloquently recited by our teacher today. The crowds erupted in an outpouring of national pride, solidarity, and gratitude. The curtain had closed on that past, and the baton was now passed to the father of our nation, Belize's first Prime Minister, George Price, and his cabinet, and the long-awaited, sought-after dream of an independent Belize became a reality. That moment was surreal. It was a remarkable moment in history. O land of the free by the Carib Sea, this tranquil haven of democracy, by the might of truth and the grace of God, no longer would we be hewers of wood. Our anthem speaks eloquently to our shared identity and aspirations as sons and daughters of Belize. Arise, ye sons, commands that we remember the sacrifices of those who came before us and boldly embrace our future, clothed in our God-given dignity as a free and democratic people. Beautiful words that capture the very essence of who we are called to become. Later in that day, the members of the National Assembly gathered in our capital of Belmopan. Their first act as representatives of a free, sovereign, and independent people was to adopt our Belizean Constitution. The question before them on that historic day is the same question I ask of you now and here. Who do you say we are, Belize? The answer to that all-important question is enshrined so eloquently and summarized in the preamble of our Belizean Constitution. We are a people, Belize, who affirm that the nation of Belize is founded on principles which acknowledge the supremacy of God, faith in human rights and fundamental freedoms. We are a people, Belize, who affirm the position of the family in society of free men and women and free institutions. We are a people, Belize, who affirm the dignity of the human person, the equal and inalienable rights with which all members of the human family are endowed by our Creator. We are a people, Belize, who believe that the will of the people shall form the basis of government in a democratic society, in which government is freely elected and is required to enact and enforce policies to protect and safeguard the unity, freedom, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of Belize. We are a people, Belize, who recognize that men and institutions remain free only when freedom is founded upon respect for the moral and spiritual values and upon the rule of law. This, my Belizean brothers and sisters, is the vision of who we are and who we aspire to be. The magnificent words of the preamble affirm that our identity, our dignity, our social and cultural values of the people are to be protected and preserved by our elected representatives. In sum, our preamble tells our story, not some counterfeit narrative that seeks to rewrite the pages of our history for the purpose of accommodating external agendas and perhaps completely eclipsing our identity. You see, the recognition of these God-given gifts did not come cheaply. We can recall the words of the father of the nation, calling us to participate in that peaceful, constructive Belizean revolution. He recognized that each successive generation must contribute toward the prosperity, preservation, and protection on the march toward national development. If we are to succeed in this very important mission and write the next chapter of history, we must first understand our story and then be able to articulate it with great national pride. So let's look deeper into our national story by continuing our walk through the nation's history to the chapter written before 1981. The complete tale takes us back to 1950, when the father of the nation led the nationalist movement with a singular mission to win for us self-government and an independent Belize. This was a time of great tragedy on a global scale. World War II had left a trail of death and destruction with over 50 million civilian and military lives lost. The global community grappled with the economic calamity that followed. But of great significance for us in Belize is the international system that emerged in the wake of the deadly conflict. You see, the power structure had radically shifted. No longer was the world dominated by European powers. The center of gravity shifted to the United States bloc and the Russian bloc. meaning two competing worldviews were vying for supremacy. Some nations were given the choice between joining freedom-loving people or enduring socialist and communist governance. Others had no choice, and thus began what we all know in history as the Cold War. In our corner of the globe, the Belize National Movement formed, and in 1950, it introduced its vision for self-governance and for independence. But in 1960, this dream to the realization of an independent Belize would experience a delay when the United Nations passed Resolution 1514, a declaration granting independence to colonial countries and peoples. The declaration recognized that the people of the world ardently desired the end of colonialism in all its manifestations. By definition, Belize was counted among that number as a self-governing nation. But because of the territorial claim laid by neighboring Guatemala, who threatened to take the territory by force, an independent Belize was hindered. Undeterred by what could be deemed an insurmountable challenge at the UN, and with Latin American countries aligning themselves with Guatemala, Premier George Price decided to take his case to the global community and win support for our cause. What would transpire to seal our fate as a nation could only be described as divine intervention. By the grace of God and the hand of providence, Panama, under President Omar Torrijos, endorsed Belize's quest to become an independent nation, soon to be followed by Cuba's Fidel Castro. And so began the wave of support for Belize's independence. And on September 25th, at the 13th plenary session of the United Nations Security Council and the General Assembly, all countries of the world, with the exception of Guatemala, voted for admission of Belize into the global family of nations. We should pause here and reflect on the remarkable nature of what took place. It must not be missed on us that the key endorsements that propelled us toward an independent Belize came from a military dictator and a communist leader in Cuba. Yet, this did not sway Premier George Price or his cabinet to yield to their worldview. He made the wise choice that he knew would resonate with our Belizean people, the choice of building our nation upon freedom and democracy, a nation underpinned by universal principles which create the environment needed to nurture democracy, a democracy that now flourishes. Our preamble points us toward a deeper truth about what happened in those critical early days, as it acknowledges the supremacy of God as giving birth to our beloved Belize. But what exactly does this mean? What inspired the father of the nation to take this path of freedom, if not guidance from above? In making that fateful choice, we Belizeans, we became a covenant people. You will be my people, Belize, and I will be your God. And what a most faithful God He has been over the past 42 years. Even as we are maturing as a nation, we can see the hand of providence protecting Belize from invasion of a hostile neighbor, from devastating hurricanes, famines, and diseases. And so it is exciting that after 42 years of independence, we are called to renew this sacred covenant among our people. The time could not be more opportune. You see, 40 is that number of biblical transition, where great transformations were experienced. Will it be so for us, Belize? Will we continue to dwell in the shelter of the Most High and find rest in the shadow of the Almighty? Because this is our story. This is our song. And now we move forward, looking at our Constitution in this national exercise to strengthen the way we are governed for generations to come. My being summoned to serve on the People's Constitution is more than just an honor. It is a rallying cry for this generation to protect, preserve, and defend our story. And so before I leave you today, I ask you to hold out your hands in a cup of blessing. Today you are receiving a jewel that is the supremacy of God in the law of this land, a jewel that is God's priority to dignity of the human person, a jewel that is the strength of the family, the foundation of the common good. So the jewel that is our duty, that our institutions continue to support and strengthen marriage, family, and community, a jewel that is our devotion, and through us, our nation's devotion to fundamental rights of free speech, free press, assembly, equal justice under the law, free worship, and the responsibility to work for the preservation of all that we do in public and private life. A jewel that is the dignity of productive work and the right to form a business, join a union, and be a source in our rights for property, all the instruments of creating and preserving the institutions of productive work. A jewel that is our devotion to the right for life. A jewel that is our devotion to following Christ, to give support to the poor. A jewel that is our remembrance, as Jesus taught us. Blessed are the peacemakers. A jewel that is the beauty and wonder of this blessed land. The jewel in your hand is the future of our jewel of a nation. We are taught, abide in these three: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. And today, at this moment, in this place, we are declaring our love for this nation. We are confirming our devotion to preserving in our fundamental law all that makes this nation a jewel. This is our duty. This is our covenant. Each generation of leaders is charged with the sacred duty to preserve, to protect, and to defend our story and acknowledge the foundational markers, the universal principles, and inalienable rights which precede our Constitution. And so, let us execute this mission bestowed on us by the might of truth and the grace of God, faithfully and fully. Thank you.
This is my story. This is my song, praising my Savior.